This video has been made possible by Mould King. I want to light a candle in worship of our one true saint, Jangbricks. Because if it hadn't been for Jangbricks, I would not have looked at the Mould King website. Because, you know, when someone makes a model of LNER A4 Mallard, I can't help but, have a look. And wouldn't you know it, they also produce a model of 60163 Flying Scotsman. And guess who reached out to me a couple of days later? So after a couple of days chatting to Mould King, they sent me something in the mail. And what were my findings? Well, let's just, for reference, take a look at this carriage right here that I built. Now let's place a random selected minifigure right alongside it. And now, let's put Mould King's Flying Scotsman into the frame. It's so big, it doesn't even fit. So the first thing you actually built with this, which was where I was actually kind of surprised, is you start with the Cartazzi wheel set. Whilst that isn't a bad thing, you'd think that you'd first start with the main frame and then you start adding bits to that. But no, actually this area right here is like the basis of the entire thing. Hang on, let me just put this better in frame. It's so large, I don't know how to display this properly. Now, as you can see, this is a stamp or a sticker across multiple parts, but that doesn't bother me. The flat-sided bricks are mostly aligned to the degree where, you get minimal creases and air bubbles. But hold that thought, because I do have opinions. Speaking of opinions, I have not been paid for mine. Mould King specifically told me that they relinquish any and all creative input on this video. They have given me something for my time, not for my opinion. So keep that in mind. As far as an L-gauge train goes, this thing is massive. And it feels massive. Like, you have to hold it the same way you would hold a model train, like on the underside of the boiler. Don't hold it by the running plate because, and that's actually a thing that I'm going to discuss later on, now, if you have like this sat down, on your layout, or in a display, or in a diorama, it has a presence. Like, it is massive, and yet it's still like proper L gauge. The only thing that will prohibit this from running on L gauge track, if you were to fit it with a motor, shall we speak, is that this Cartazzi wheel set, much like on the real thing, is fixed. So you can't, it won't go around bends. But also, these steps elements that they put at the rear, they prevent it from going over point work, over level crossing. So do bear that in mind. You shouldn't look at this as a model that has the potential to be motorized. This is a static model first and foremost. And for a static model, and for its recommended retail price, I think you'd struggle to find better. Hear me out. A lot of times, when you want to do a brick built, A3, you kind of have to compromise either on its frames, because it has to negotiate, your standard L gauge track work, or you have to compromise on its actual, proportions. And as this is, a static train first and foremost, they can keep proportions in mind first and foremost. Which I think creates a very elegant looking model, but also one that can still, have a presence on, let's say, if you have a display diorama of a museum. In fact, if you were to hypothetically have a giant setup that looks like Sheldon, you could have this thing just shuttle up and down. Though, with the way that this is constructed, it does have a spot that there it is. It binds a bit at some parts of the rotation. Something I also really like is that the safety valves on this thing are not plated or otherwise made in gold-coloured plastic. But what is bright brass-coloured is inside the cab. Now I knocked over a Varta. If I want to show you this, I have to slightly deconstruct it, because if I then manage to, it's just so large. Handling it is. Those taps, they are electroplated. The same goes for this this stud right here with a hole in it. By the way, I think this is one of the most clever part inclusions, because that lever of the regulator, or I think actually that's a brake, that's one of those paint roller elements. And if you then look at it from this perspective, actually you can see it far better than I can because I have to look through the ring light. Doesn't that look smart? Like even the wee firehole door. I think this is really clever. I really think they made this very clever. I do think it's a shame though that they didn't add like another jumper here for a whistle, but we'll get to that. With it being brick built, of course, it does have to make some compromise. You know, it is a little fat, so to speak. But you're not going to believe this from me, but like the way this... Okay, let me just like take these off, right? Let me just take the elephant ears off. The way, you know, this looks, and then it dips right here above the Cartazzi wheel set, and then it has that big squarish cab with the square windows. This is Henry.
Henry slept with my dog.
Now the bricks that Mould King used, they are Go bricks, I'm told, by our Lord and Saviour Jang. Oh! So, you know, I was never going to question the quality, but I have had brick-built trains where, especially the plates, they don't, like, stick together properly. Like, the plates, they bow a significant amount if you, like, try to put them on top of one another. And on this one, this is not the case. I am very pleased with the quality of the bricks themselves. But, like I says, the construction of the build can get a bit... So, I showed you that this is just, like, hovering, right? Like, it's only held by the stud that's on this curved piece, and then it's held down by basically the presence of this slope, roof slope here, and that, but it's not like studded down because, you know, this is flat, this is a tile. Yeah, and the same goes for the detailing of the Cartazzi wheel set. If you were to catch it with your thumb whilst you're carrying it, it very easily snaps off. Now, the repair is relatively straightforward, but because this is the first thing you start with, it's very finicky and fragile when you start out. Now, of course, when you get more to hold the model, that becomes a non-issue, but I do think that could have been designed better. Same goes for the front of the model. Like, you can very easily knock one of those off. Right, so I don't know how I can better showcase this locomotive. So I'm gonna show you her outside, of course, in a bit, because the sunlight just does her more justice. But let's just, for now, take a look at the model's tender, which I think is one of the strongest elements of this model. I know it's a tender, you know, it only has to be a block that's vaguely shaped like it holds something. But they actually did a corridor tender. Now, granted, there's no outside of it, which, fair. That would, I think, compromise the stability of this. But if you poke this out, you can actually see that they did it like with those shipping container wall elements. And I just think, again, that's really clever. Again, these trucks are static, like on the real thing. So this thing won't, you know, go around corners very easily. So again, if you're expecting this to run, you're going to have to do some hell of a lot of modification. I think you can, like, add some turntables, but I don't know. Also, if you want to have it coupled to something, you would have to use one of those, coupling elements, because this just uses the ball joint. And funnily enough, the tender fall plate also works like that. Like you have to attach it right here, and then that kind of bridges the gap. Now, I showed you the things I like. I've showed you the things I don't like, because like I said, I would have done it differently, where you'd started with the frame, then bolted things on top of that, because this connection, when you're building it, this connection is so fragile, and it will break if you're not careful with it. I'm not saying that I was careless. I'm just saying that it did happen multiple times, so keep that in mind. I do think that sometimes the design process leaves a little to be desired, but I think the finished product makes up for that. So then what I would have done is, I'm just going to add all the mods, so I'll be right back. These are the parts that I'm left with. And this is what I did with them. I scooted the smoke deflector forward just one bit, and I made this a tile so that it looks like the superheater. And I added, I changed the orientation of the air vents, and I made them black. And I'm planning to paint this one gold, but this is supposed to be the whistle. And yeah, I couldn't find a part like this in gold, so I have to spray it gold one of these days. The final thing is that I changed how this works. Instead of those big red bushings, which press against the sides of the frame, slowing the whole thing down, I've now eliminated the points of binding, and now it's far smoother by adding those half yellow bushings in it. And I think I did a decent job of that. Similarly, I changed one of these axles, because this one also kept binding, so these are just now cross axle pins, which oh dear, these. As a whole package, I think this is really good. Now I'll bring her outside where the lighting is better. I'll write a wee script, basically summarising my thoughts on this thing, and we'll round this off like we always do. As this build cannot go around curves, there wouldn't be a point to setting up an oval of track and setting this thing down on it. But I did want to show you the whole of the build in the sunlight like this, as to give a better impression of the colours and such. Whilst the modifications I wanted to make straight out of the box are minimal, I do think just that splash of gold on the whistle catches the eye in just the right way. This is also a perfect opportunity to showcase the base for the locomotive to be displayed on. The base is fine, it serves. The telegraph poles are very fragile, but they add some scale to the build, which is nice. I do find the A3 build to not sit securely on the build of the base, owing to there not being any actual rails for the locomotive to sit on. I find this particularly odd because the display builds immediately preceding and following this Scotsman, products 12041 and 12045 respectively, do have actual rails the locomotive sits on. For reference, Flying Scotsman is product 12044. In fact, the product number is used as the running number on a few of the stickers. But strangely, the locomotive has 3 separate running numbers. On the firebox and on the front buffer beam, it is 12044, the product number. On the smoke deflectors, it's 0044. And on the cab side, it's 60044, following the numbering convention of the British Rail Eastern region. In real life, number 6044 was actually A3 class Melton. These discrepancies are why I only applied the cab side and pressure gauge stickers to the engine, as I have some issues with the rest of the sticker sheet. Static Train does not sound like a company I want operating my trains. Train arrival. Right, mate, if you say so. And they want you to put black stickers on the cab roof, and the stickers are the exact dimensions of all of these elements which make up the cab roof, should they be perfectly aligned. And that is much harder to do than it sounds, as if you can't manage to do that, then the stickers will be either overhanging over the side of the elements, attracting all sorts of fluff and dust, or they will be perfectly aligned with one of the parts, but then will be full of creases from the other elements which aren't aligned within those tight tolerances. Which is also why I give my example a simple black tile on the roof. And even though this model can't round curves, as I've mentioned before, she has a presence, doesn't she? With it still being a rough approximation of an A3 in L gauge, it wouldn't look out of place amongst other trains on a display or layout. And I think the key to that homogeny is the way it is designed. Far too often you see models of locomotives which so happen to be built out of blocks, rather than a brick-built locomotive which represents an existing class, as is the case here. The way Mould King has achieved this is through an almost lack of specialised parts, resulting in the part usage being actually very clever, speaking as someone who could never design a brick-built thing for the life of me. I've already mentioned the paint roller for the controls, but what about the paint roller for the brake lines, the phone for the handrails, this handle for a fusible plug, or just the simple salmon-coloured studs for the lubricators? Now then, when it comes to price, this set, number 12044, as I've said, is £56 or €68 directly from Mould King. This does track with the market trend when it comes to L gauge locomotives, especially when they're unmotorised. That being said, you do get a lot of excellent locomotive for that price, and shipping to most of Europe is free. If you like what you see and you are willing to part with said amount of coin for it and support your local Scottish manlet, viewers of this channel can use my affiliate link in the description, that is mouldkingcorp.com/got4472, to get 5% off your order, and I get a small kickback too. Again, Mould King allows me to be very open about the fact that I'm a reviewer, not a salesman, so I hope I could show you something which I was generally looking to purchase regardless of them having reached out to me or not. So on that note, thank you for watching. Thank you for your time, and I hope to show you more of the things I've been working on very, very soon. Cheerio!